This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information and to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Dear Enemy by Jean Webster. Part 13. The John Grier Home. Saturday. Dear Gordon, your letter of Thursday is at hand, and extremely silly I consider it. Of course I am not trying to let you down easy. That isn't my way. If I let you down at all, it will be suddenly and with an awful bump. But I honestly didn't realize that it had been 3 weeks since I wrote. Please excuse. Also, my dear sir, I have to bring you to account. You were in New York last week, and you never ran up to see us. You thought we wouldn't find it out, but we heard and are insulted. Would you like an outline of my day's activities? Wrote monthly report for trustees meeting. Audited accounts. Entertained agent of State Charities Aid Association for luncheon. Supervised children's menus for next 10 days. Dictated 5 letters to families who have our children. Visited our little feeble-minded Loretta Higgins. Pardon the reference, I know you don't like me to mention the feeble-minded. Who is being boarded out in a nice, comfortable family, where she is learning to work. Came back to tea and a conference with the doctor about sending a child with tubercular glands to a sanatorium. Read an article on cottage versus congregate system for housing dependent children. We do need cottages. I wish you'd send us a few for a Christmas present. And now at 9 o'clock I am sleepily beginning a letter to you. Do you know how many young society girls can point to such a useful day as that? Oh, I forgot to say that I stole 10 minutes from my accounts this morning to install a new cook. Our Sally Washington Johnston, who cooked fit for the angels, had a dreadful, dreadful temper, and terrorized poor Noah, our super-excellent furnace man, to the point of giving notice. We couldn't spare Noah. He's more useful to the institution than its superintendent, so Sally Washington Johnston is no more. When I asked the new cook her name, she replied, "My name is Suzanne Estelle, but my friends call me Pet." Pet cooked the dinner tonight, but I must say that she lacks Sally's delicate touch. I am awfully disappointed that you didn't visit us while Sally was still here. You would have taken away an exalted opinion of my housekeeping. Drowsiness overcame me at that point, and it's now 2 days later. Poor neglected Gordon. It has just occurred to me that you never got thanked for the modeling clay which came 2 weeks ago, and it was such an unusually intelligent present that I should have telegraphed my appreciation. When I opened the box and saw all that nice, messy, putty stuff, I sat down on the spot and created a statue of Singapore. The children love it, and it is very good to have the handicraft side of their training encouraged. After a careful study of American history, I have determined that nothing is so valuable to a future president as an early, obligatory, unescapable performance of chores. Therefore, I have divided the daily work of this institution into 100 parcels, and the children rotate weekly through a succession of unaccustomed tasks. Of course, they do everything badly, for just as they learn how, they progress to something new. It would be infinitely easier for us to follow Mrs. Lippett's immoral custom of keeping each child sentenced for life to a well-learned routine, but when the temptation assails me I recall the dreary picture of Florence Henty, who polished the brass doorknobs of this institution for 7 years, and I sternly shove the children on. I get angry every time I think of Mrs. Lippett. She had exactly the point of view of a Tammany politician, no slightest sense of service to society. Her only interest in the John Grier Home was to get a living out of it. Wednesday. What new branch of learning do you think I have introduced into my asylum? Table manners! I never had any idea that it was such a lot of trouble to teach children how to eat and drink. Their favorite method is to put their mouths down to their mugs and lap their milk like kittens. Good manners are not merely snobbish ornaments, as Mrs. Lippett's regime appeared to believe. They mean self-discipline and thought for others, and my children have got to learn them. That woman never allowed them to talk at their meals, and I am having the most dreadful time getting any conversation out of them above a frightened whisper. So I have instituted the custom of the entire staff, myself included, sitting with them at the table and directing the talk along cheerful and improving lines. Also, I have established a small, very strict training table, where the little dears, in relays, undergo a week of steady badgering. Our uplifting table conversations run like this. Yes, Tom, Napoleon Bonaparte was a very great man. Elbows off the table. He possessed a tremendous power of concentrating his mind on whatever he wanted to have, and that is the way to accomplish— Don't snatch, Susan. Ask politely for the bread, and Carrie will pass it to you. But he was an example of the fact that selfish thought just for oneself, without considering the lives of others, will come to disaster in the— Tom! Keep your mouth shut when you chew. And after the Battle of Waterloo, let Sadie's cookie alone. His fall was all the greater because— Sadie Kate, you may leave the table. It makes no difference what he did. Under no provocation does a lady slap a gentleman. 2 more days have passed. This is the same kind of meandering letter I write to Judy. At least, my dear man, you can't complain that I haven't been thinking about you this week. I know you hate to be told all about the asylum, but I can't help it, for it's all I know. I don't have 5 minutes a day to read the papers. The big outside world has dropped away. My interests all lie on the inside of this little iron enclosure. I am, at present, S. McBride, Superintendent of the John Grier Home. Thursday. Dear Enemy, time is but the stream I go a-fishing in. Hasn't that a very philosophical, detached, Lord of the Universe sound? It comes from Thoreau, which I am assiduously reading at present. As you see, I have revolted against your literature and taken to my own. The last 2 evenings have been devoted to Walden, a book as far removed as possible from the problems of the dependent child. Did you ever read old Henry David Thoreau? You really ought. I think you'd find him a congenial soul. Listen to this. Society is commonly too cheap. We meet at very short intervals, not having had time to acquire any new value for each other. It would be better if there were but one habitation to a square mile, as where I live. A pleasant, expansive, neighbor-like man he must have been. He reminds me in some ways of Sandy. This is to tell you that we have a placing out agent visiting us. She is about to dispose of 4 chicks, one of them Thomas Kehoe. What do you think? Ought we to risk it? The place she has in mind for him is a farm in a no-license portion of Connecticut, where he will work hard for his board, and live in the farmer's family. It sounds exactly the right thing, and we can't keep him here forever. He'll have to be turned out some day into a world full of whiskey. I'm sorry to tear you away from that cheerful work on dementia precox, but I'd be most obliged if you could drop in here toward 8 o'clock for a conference with the agent. I am, as usual, S. McBride. June 17th. My dear Judy, Betsy has perpetrated a most unconscionable trick upon a pair of adopting parents. They have traveled east from Ohio in their touring car for the dual purpose of seeing the country and picking up a daughter. They appear to be the leading citizens of their town, whose name at the moment escapes me, but it's a very important town. It has electric lights and gas, and Mr. Leading Citizen owns the controlling interest in both plants. With a wave of his hand he could plunge that entire town into darkness. But fortunately he's a kind man, and won't do anything so harsh, not even if they fail to re-elect him mayor. He lives in a brick house with a slate roof and 2 towers, and has a deer and fountain, and lots of nice shade trees in the yard. He carries its photograph in his pocket. They are good-natured, generous, kind-hearted, smiling people, and a little fat. You can see what desirable parents they would make. Well, we had exactly the daughter of their dreams. Only, as they came without giving us notice, she was dressed in a flannelette nightgown, and her face was dirty. They looked Caroline over and were not impressed, but they thanked us politely and said they would bear her in mind. They wanted to visit the New York orphanage before deciding. We knew well that if they saw that superior assemblage of children, our poor little Caroline would never have a chance. Then Betsy rose to the emergency. She graciously invited them to motor over to her house for tea that afternoon, and inspect one of our little wards who would be visiting her baby niece. Mr. and Mrs. Leading Citizen do not know many people in the East, and they haven't been receiving the invitations that they feel are their due, so they were quite innocently pleased